Hello Wargamers, Brother Zachareus here with the first video since Invasive Ramnus has returned from traveling. I'm going to be taking this time to respond to some of the comments left in my last video, because for whatever reason I seem to be incapable of responding in the actual chat. So I'm working on figuring out why that is, but for now this is going to be my solution. There were a couple comments that really stuck out, at least to me, for a variety of reasons, and I would like to address each of them specifically. The first and foremost for me is the one that Rogue Mike left about a week ago, and he only got one thumbs up. I wish I could give him about 4 or 5 more, because I thought that he had a really awesome solution to something I brought up last video. He said that he didn't want the Blood Angels encroaching on the Raven Guards. We get to use our jump packs all the time, chapter tactic, and instead give Blood Angels Shroud when they deep strike, Hammer of Wrath, substitute the weapon profile so that if you have AP3 or AP2 you get that on the Hammer of Wrath hit. Furious Charge as a blanket rule, and Red Thirst is +2 to charge range just straight up. So I thought that that was an awesome solution to the whole thing, and it makes them distinct from the Raven Guard in terms of gameplay, and it also follows their fluff very well. The Blood Angels are supposed to be extremely ferocious in close combat, and this is a great way of differentiating that from both the Raven Guard's jump around, be sneaky thing that they do, and also from the Space Wolves having their counter strike or counterattack or whatever it is that they have. So I think that that was great. I would love to see exactly those rules put in place in the upcoming codex. I wish I could give you at least 1 thumbs up, but I can't. On a similar note, Mini Game Painter said that he would like to, or she would like to see the Blood Angels Dreadnought options expanded like they did with the Space Wolves. And on a personal level, that is kind of a sore spot for me, because one of the reasons I gravitated toward the Blood Angels years ago was because they were the first Space Marine chapters to actually have multiple Dreadnought options. The Venerable Dreadnought existed back then, I believe, just with the Dark Angels. It may have been with the Codex Space Marines too, but that's just an upgrade for the standard Dreadnought. The Blood Angels had both the Furioso Dreadnought, they had Moriar the Chosen, and they had the regular Dreadnought. And Moriar the Chosen essentially morphed into the Death Company Dreadnought on kind of a smaller scale, but you could take multiple of them, given the correct number of Death Company. But that kind of became less of an awesome point as time has gone by, since the Codex Space Marines have received the Ironclad Dreadnought, which fulfills a similar but slightly different role compared to the Furiosa Dreadnought. And the Space Wolves, they've always had, well, as long as I've played, had Bjorn the Fell-Handed. But with the inclusion of Murderfang, he kind of tramples all over the Furiosa Dreadnought's toes, because the Furiosa Dreadnought can, approach the same level of carnage, if not more, as Murderfang. But he is every bit as expensive, and his baseline strength is significantly higher. So I'm alright with that being the case. I really am, and I don't think that the Blood Angels need new Dreadnought models, because they're all in plastic already. And I don't actually dislike how simple they are. I like that look. If they got new ones, that'd be great, but it's not something that I really view as a priority. And really, I'd be totally fine with the Dreadnoughts having the same options they have now, just having their points dropped, significantly enough that they still stand out to other Dreadnoughts. Like the Furioso right now, the baseline is the same as Murderfang, so they're going to be more expensive than Murderfang is. But their baseline damage is significantly lower. If we were to make the point cost for the Furioso Dreadnought significantly lower than Murderfang, then I would be very, very pleased with that. If you brought the Furioso baseline to, say, 80 points, that would probably be a good change for Dreadnoughts in general, but specifically for the Furioso right now, and then have the upgrades bring him up to that Murderfang level of points at 125, I think that'd be pretty cool. Same thing with the Furioso Librarian, which was included in the last codex. If you reduce that there, that would bring him up to that same level of points with the librarian upgrade as well. So I think that that would be a comfortable solution to that issue. So you'd be able to field more dreadnoughts, for cheaper. Somebody brought up chaplains and wanting them to be cheaper, and I think that's going to happen with all of the generic HQ options that the Blood Angels have, and it's going to be pretty significant because, as it is, I don't recall mentioning it in the previous video, but the Blood Angels librarian costs nearly double all the other librarians do, and they have significantly fewer options. Those options are definitely going to be expanded, and I think that their price is going to be dropped to the same level. I think the same thing is going to happen with the captain, and the same thing is going to happen with the Reclusiarch. But as it is, the Reclusiarch costs 130 points, which is ridiculous. So I think that they'll drop that probably down to 70 or 80 points, and I think that will be just fine. Yeah. One more thing that really stood out, and I probably will talk for a long time about this without realizing it, is Conrad von Karstein said that he thinks, or she, that the Sanguinor will be the Lord of War for the Blood Angels. And I really hope that he's wrong. And I think that a lot of Blood Angels players hope that he's wrong. But there are 3 primary contenders that people will talk about. I think that most Blood Angels players want Mephiston to be the Lord of War, if we get one. And a lot of people who maybe casually play the Blood Angels as just kind of a side thing, or don't play them at all but know enough about them, think that Dante or the Sanguinor will be the Lords of War. And there's honestly a good case for any of them being the Lords of War. Dante, he's the chapter master, but he's not really, a warrior. He's more of a tactician. He's just too old and frail these days. The Mephiston, because he is just a monster. And then the Sanguinor, because he is this mythical, almost Phoenix Lord-like Blood Angel that shows up every once in a while, beats everybody up, and then disappears. And the Sanguinor, I think, is kind of a sore spot for most Blood Angels players because he was just kind of shoehorned into the last codex and given probably the coolest model the Blood Angels have available to them, and given an awkward space in gameplay between Mephiston and Dante. He's obviously supposed to be a close combat powerhouse, and at one time he kind of was, but he's not as effective as Mephiston in that role, and right now he's significantly less effective than Mephiston in that role. And what's more is that he does have Eternal Warrior. He's the only Blood Angels character with Eternal Warrior, but he only has 3 wounds and he's only toughness 4. So in a lot of ways, he is less durable than both Mephiston and Commander Dante. Commander Dante does not have Eternal Warrior, but he at least has more wounds. And he has he's got a 4-up invulnerable save instead of a 3-up invulnerable save, but that's not going to make the difference more often than not. So as it is currently, the Sanguinor has weak fluff, and he has an awesome model that just does not live up to what it should, and he's atrociously expensive. Now, if they kept him at that price point at 275 and gave him substantial buffs, gave him double the wounds, or they're probably going to give him pt.2 on his close combat attacks again, but they need to really amp up his survivability, because in 6th and 7th edition, he does not live long at all. He doesn't have independent character just like Mephiston, so he is extremely susceptible to massive amounts of fire, or just, if you're playing against Tau, like is going to be common, a single crisis team, or a broadside team, or even a single Riptide shooting at him. The Riptide will shoot other things, but one unit dedicating its shots to him is likely to kill him in a single turn before he can do anything. And that's just not acceptable for a nearly 300-point unit, especially when a model like a Riptide or a Crisis team clocks in as far more effective and under 200 points. So if they do make him the Lord of War, they really need to buff him up, at least in terms of survivability, because it's just not, it would not work with his current rules. But even aside from that, if they were to make him a Lord of War, I think that Mephiston still would be. So that's it for this week. Next week, I think I'm going to talk about specifically how current elite options operate and how I hope they will in the upcoming codex. And also with how that particular slot, at least to me, feels cramped as it is currently, especially with our HQ options limiting us in terms of detachments. So until then, happy wargaming.